something I've said in the past was that it wasn't until like I'd stepped into my transition that I actually like felt like an adult. And I didn't think that was a real thing. I didn't think feeling like an adult was a real thing. I felt like a fabrication of, the world that tells you what you're supposed to do with your life. But, and I don't know really what that means, but all of a sudden I had a degree of agency over myself, like on an internal level that I hadn't experienced before. That like I was able to like see what I wanted and start to live my life the way I wanted to live it. And there's been so much since then. There's been like claiming my sexuality in a way that I hadn't before. And being able to actually like emote my relationships to people. And something I often say is that hormone replacement therapy is like a psychotropic drug. That like this whole process of transitioning has changed my perception of reality, because it's not only altered how I like the biological capacity in terms of like how I process things in that way, and how like the mechanical organism of my body and how I interface with the world, but also like the process of like having been assigned male at birth and living one life and then stepping into someone else. I feel like the person who I used to be. Like, I mean, there's a trans turn of phrase about where the person you are before is called the egg. And it's often referred to, like the way that trans folks talk about it is as a separate person. So more and more, I feel like disassociated from that person and those memories, and feel like I'm myself outside of time. Like I'm someone else who has stepped into someone else's existence,
right,
and replaced them.
Right. I hadn't thought about that, but as I'm thinking about it now. Granted, unintentionally. This is part of the game. Even before I tried to make it that, I was never trying to make it so personal. But the idea of
that's something only we could do together,
right?
Like,
but the idea that you are overriding old lives, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the confusion of who was that mystery person? I have conflicting memories. But knowing that with time it lines up. Like there's a lot going on there that I not intentional, but I think is a takeaway. You know?
I've been a woman my whole life, but I've been stuck in different places and different modalities of expression. And at this point in my life, I know who I am with a certainty that I've never had before. And some days, I wish I could go back and make that realization happen sooner. But at the end of the day, I know that the only reason I'm able to be the person I am is because of the journey that I was on and the ways that I like fought to be here now. But being able to be Kate and to be a teenager in whatever exceptional circumstances, like to be a version of myself that didn't have that baggage was remarkable to begin with, and I couldn't have guessed how that would feel. Not to mention the fact of like, I don't think I mentioned this in the in any of our commentaries about the process, but this game influenced the ways that my dreams worked sometimes. Like I had fourth dimensional dreams where I was experiencing a place and people in alternate timelines, and it was in a way that made sense to me. Like there used to be this thing I would do. I would play these little stories in my head, like during showers and like any other sort of like liminal time when you're just like left with your own thoughts. And a narrative that was reoccurring for years and it went away when I really stepped into my transition was like, what if I had been assigned female at birth? Or like, what if, but it's a time travel thing.
Yeah.
What if my consciousness from now
went back, yeah.
like was like awoke
yeah.
at birth, and then that like either the thought experiment of and I knew I was trans, but I was still like had a body that would have been assigned male,
but knew that you could get through that.
Yeah,
like, having the knowledge that eventually you get to that point.
And then also the weird experiment of like, but in either case, if I'm born with the knowledge of what everything I have now, how do I proceed?
Yeah.
How do I use my knowledge or don't use my knowledge in order to preserve? Because as soon as you start, it's like it's a whole massive time travel thought experiment of like, as soon as you start to manipulate things, you also lose control of how you could do things in the future.
Yeah.
Because, but then so much of it was really tethered to like eventually I was less interested in the one where like I had to like assert my transness, and just the one where I was assigned female at birth. And what I'm saying is like instead of that, like in its place, they're like Kate Was Here has kind of started occupying that space, in like those like liminal mental downtime things, like especially on on cliffhangers, like deciding like how am I gonna work my way through that, like what's Kate thinking, and all that. I don't know. It's all a long story, but yeah, I'm shook. Maybe it'll come to me. Maybe more. But then again,
much like time displacement, it'll catch up to you.
We began Kate Was Here with a pre-episode unpacking the experiment in the vaguest terms possible.
Sure.
As you've heard at the end of the last episode, the scope of what we created went far beyond intent and expectations.
Yeah.
In this, we're going to check in with the experiment, talk about how it went. And Doug, I know you put in so much work into this to ensure that the playability of it was fluid and had the full scope of everything. The decisions that I made were only influenced by part of the work you did, and there is so much more that I didn't know that has never been that was not explored during this game.
Yeah.
So first I want to talk about your thoughts on a technical level of the experiment, what it means, how you perceive it, where it's going, all that technical stuff, and then also like unpack all of the paths that could have been and options and considerations in the process of creating Kate Was Here, because I can always sense the work that's gone into it, but I can only choose one thing at a time.
Yeah.
It feels weird to have a game you can't do multiple playthroughs of, though. Granted, this one is so powerful, I don't think that would be. I wouldn't do it personally because it was so visceral. But
I mean, when you say a game that you couldn't do multiple playthroughs of, you mean from a DM standpoint or from a player standpoint?
From a player standpoint.
Well, with Back to the Future, you can. You can't play through again because you just go back and visit. That's what Back to the Future 2, the second movie. That's what that was. They're playing it again, the old 1955.
I mean, I get it. Absolutely.
I know what you mean. What you mean. To experience it for the first time.
Yeah.
From the GM perspective. I think I even said, I feel like the experiment was a complete success.
I would hope so.
Yeah. However, the goal in setting out to do it, like I mentioned, was, sort of testing what my limits were. Like, what was I capable of doing? Could I make a small enough intimate experience for one player that felt realistic and grounded, and like you weren't just playing through something that I had previously written? And in order to guarantee that, I wouldn't have it previously written. We would just dive in. The one thing I knew for sure at the beginning of the game was also the hardest part of the game, which was getting Kate in the fridge. That was the most bottlenecked moment of the entire thing, and it was difficult to find reasons for you to get in there. But you played along with it. You sort of understood. You got the gist of it, and I didn't have to push you too hard to do it because you just understood, we're going on this journey, so let's just go for it.
My big resistance there was just the knowledge that you should not get in an antique fridge.
Right, ever. This is proof of that. But also just that the circumstances around it, it's like, because when you think about it, everyone knows you don't get into a refrigerator. You just don't do it. So what circumstances could possibly force someone into a weird ass fridge that has all this electrical equipment on it? And so it was that for me, that was the biggest stretch in terms of like, can I, how do I get someone in there in a way that it's a choice, but also please get into the thing, because if you decide to walk away, then that's the end of it. I mean, there's other ways where if you leave and you think that's really weird, maybe we'll come back and investigate it later. I didn't think in those terms because it needed an immediacy to it, whatever.
Right.
But again, that was me learning that I was so interested in the moments after that, where after Kate steps into the fridge, big flash of light. From there on out, Kate's in the driver's seat, and I didn't know where she was going to go. I knew certain people would be in certain places if she decided to go to a certain place. And if she was kind of like, well, I'm not sure where to go, I could offer up suggestions. But that's pretty much it. I really wanted to try to restrain myself as much as possible from trying to, I could suggest places to go, but I would never try to be like, pushing the story too hard in one direction or the other. That's not to say that maybe certain reactions were helping push you in a direction, but reactions that are all based on the sequence of events that you played out. As the game went on, see, when we first sat down, you didn't even know it would go beyond a one session sit down thing. Like for all you knew, it was just like a one shot.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got to the end, you're like, "There's more of this," and I'm like, "Yeah." And at that moment, I thought maybe like 2 or 3 more sit down, if that, maybe just 2 more, or even just 1 more if you really sped through it.
Oh, Doug.
Yeah, I didn't know, but that's all part of the experiment. So
what made that change? Were you just because you were writing as you went, and you're like, "Ooh, here's a good idea. Here's a good idea."
Kind of, yeah. There were several time periods that I was prepared for. And I thought, maybe she won't go to all of these. Maybe she will. We'll figure it out. So there's several times where you're presented with some options, and like you'll hear whatever. And the order that you chose kind of led to each of these things, because, like, for example, you went into 2016. Oh my gosh, it's like a weird future thing now. This doesn't really feel like my home. And it's like, well, where do you want to go now? And you're like, well, let's, we could try and fix this. We could go into the future to see how things look. And you're like, well, let's actually go further into the future. And then you went further into the future. Now, I knew that each time you were jumping, the time circuits are getting more and more scrambled. So if you decided, nah, you know what, let's go to 2016, you may not have ended up in 2016 either. You probably would have gone to the Ice Age first or something like that. And then not even known about the catastrophe of that future stuff until maybe you fixed Marty Jr.'s problem. So all I know is that if you go to this point in time, shit's fucked here. If you go to this point in time, it's whatever over here. The order of which you went is all up to you. And then once you're there, the people you talk with, how they view you, whether they think you're an asshole or whether they think you're, whatever, it was all based on what I'd already predetermined of, like, okay, this is how they view things. And however Kate presents herself, that's going to determine how all this goes. And as the game went on, you had Kate behave. I mean, it's weird. It's like it grew, like, Kate grew as a character. I do genuinely feel that the Kate at the end of the story is not the Kate at the beginning, and even the Kate in the second half isn't even like the Kate in the first half after time traveling.
Right.
There's a lot more thought given into certain things, but also Kate became more confident in her abilities to take care of things and relied less on the adults that were surrounding her. That I was kind of trying to set you up for that, but I wasn't trying to push it, because again, it was all whatever you wanted to do. Because I hadn't thought that in the very beginning, Kate was just kind of like, okay, she lands in 1986 and is like, I need an adult, and like seeks out the grandparents. I hadn't considered that, but I'm like, well, yeah, the grandparents would be alive. They'd be at this address. They'd be here. So now this is happening. And Kate relying on Grandpa and Doc Brown, and then eventually Doc Brown, and then eventually, like, there's situations later where she has to rely on just herself. I mean, going off to with Martha and on that whole adventure in the Old West, like that was a decision of like, I think I can handle myself now, even though it is the Old West. You'd already been to a weird post-apocalyptic future. There was so much shit going on. Anyway, so to get to the point, really, is that I wasn't necessarily writing it in the moment as we're playing it, but every time we would end it on this sort of cliffhanger. I would then go home and say, okay, what is the most interesting thing to happen to Kate from here on out? And at the same time, once I figure out what would that be, then how do I Back to the Futurize it? Like, how does it tie into characters we know, or maybe new characters that we meet, or either way, like, how does it all fold together and feel like that experience of the movie? Because Marty goes anywhere Marty goes in time, he meets a Tannen, and it's like it's lighthearted sci-fi. It's not the most realistic thing ever. But yeah, I thought maybe it would be like 2-3 sit down sessions, but the longer it went on, the more and more Kate was changing, the more and more there were more interesting prospects that kept coming up, and it was like, man, I really want to explore that, and I think that'd be great. And then as I saw that you were like right around the time Kate was in the Old West and sort of figuring things out for herself and becoming like more comfortable being the time traveler and more comfortable having the responsibility to do this and this and this and very proactive. I'm like, all right, it seems like she's really getting to the point where we can start the denouement or the third act, just really start to wrap things up and find out what did we learn in this crazy mixed up, crazy adventure. So yeah, it went a lot longer than I thought it would. That's not a bad thing. I enjoyed it the entire time. Other things in terms on a technical level, yeah, it was really difficult. It was really difficult the whole time. But it was mostly me learning how to prep for a completely different kind of game. If I'm doing a game of Ghostbusters, I basically know, all right, I got a team of people. They all have one goal in common: stop the ghost. What is the ghost? What does it want? Where is it? They go to it. Their whole entire mission is get the ghost, but do it, do whatever.
And from your perspective, you're not just solidifying the ghost, but you're getting facts about the location. You're making sure that those spaces are imagined in ways that are like compelling and realistic and all that.
It's like making a sandbox, but the sandbox is just one little scene or location, and then they go in and play and have fun, and that's it. This was very much more like, okay, well, things there has to be immediate consequences for a lot of big choices, and the idea that the time stream can be disrupt something that you may have already done, and something that you may do now may not count later because you're going to undo it yourself, and so many other things. So that was difficult to keep track of, obviously.
What do your notes look like?
I don't know if they'd make any sense. Like, I could show you, but it's like, my notes are basically a Google document, and at the very top, I have a miniaturized version of Kate's character sheet, just boiled down to basically just the numbers, like on a small table. Below that, I have a couple of notes about like how to spend a fate point, like what you could do with a fate point when you decide to spend it. And then below that, I have my couple little facts about like the laws of quantum physics, laws of laws of regular physics, and then some laws I made up about time physics, so that if there's ever like a Doc Brown scenario that comes up, it's like I don't want to say anything that contradicts actual science, but also like established science. I also have the equation that I made that measures the amount of time you have before you'd fade away, but depending on the size of the change that you've made. So like, newspaper changes or a person fades away, how long does that person have? Well, you can hear the episode I put the equation on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
Below that,
you can look at the whiteboard in the attachments of that Patreon post.
And below that, the rest of the document is broken up into segments. Like at the top header of the page, it'll say 2016, and then below that, I just say, all right, this is where we started, today's date, whatever, October 2016, and the time, and then the rest of it is very loose, sort of just bullet points of what might happen. And things that I know, like the information I know I want to get to Kate to make a decision. And then from there, if she says yes to this, then I already know what the response is. It's really more of just like a way to prompt me. I'm not reading from the notes that much until like we move to a new time period. I'll scroll down, checking like, oh, let me check the numbers. Let me check the date, make sure that the time is correct. And then that's it. Then it just goes all the way down to the bottom, everything that could possibly happen in this time period at this whatever, and then I have a page break, and then it's 2049, whatever the year is, and then same thing. And every time I would end the session, I would copy it, make a new document for the next session, delete all the stuff that I don't need anymore, and have a little space at the top.
Delete it.
Oh, I keep all the documents.
Okay.
Like, I have a document I could read you the entire document of the first session if you wanted, but it's really pretty bland. But, like, yeah. So then I delete all the previous stuff, keeping only the key things that I need to remember, like, oh, she did this, talk to this person, it needs to come back up later, whatever. And then I just start writing whatever the next one is. And then I'll make notes of, like, oh, Mastodons went extinct this many years ago. So if she goes to the Ice Age, it can be no later than this, but no further than this. Any little fact I'll find, or if I think of something, I'll make a note at the bottom of the page or something like that. But other than that, that's pretty much it. There's at the very bottom of all the documents, I was keeping a running track of important events in the Back to the Future timeline, like whenever Doc and Marty travel to a certain space, where were they, just to make sure that she doesn't bump into previous versions of them. That didn't happen, but I was prepared just in case. But yeah, the notes for this are very different from my notes for Ghostbusters.
Right.
And very different from my notes for any other game that I've been running.
Do you think it's possible to make a version of this game that someone could pick up and play for somebody else, some other character?
I mean, is it possible? Yeah. So much of this was based on your character's choices that it would be a moot point to be like, and then sit down with the family and have Thanksgiving, because the character that you decide to play it with someone else might be like, well, fuck my family, I'm an orphan, or I'm whatever. The entire story was based on the creation of Kate's character first.
Right.
Like, the only thing I knew when I wanted to do something based on Back to the Future was that whoever was going to play it, before I even knew that you would play it, whoever was going to play it was going to make a character. They weren't going to know this was Back to the Future, and it was going to take place in maybe 2016, maybe 2017, around that time period. And their origin of their character would be from the universe where Biff Tannen was president. That's where it would start. And if they ever went back to the 50s or even before the 50s, by the time they would go to the future again, their future would be different and taken away from them. And trying to figure out, what would that character do? Like, would they sort of accept their fate? Like, Kate for a while was sort of like, I'm just a time traveler from here on out. I have no home. I have no whatever. I'm just going to sort of wander. I didn't know how it would ultimately resolve, but I was intrigued by the idea.
Right.
And that was it. That was the starting point. And then once you and I sat down and you said, well, this is what I'm thinking for this character. Her name's Kate. She's like this old, and she goes to school, and she's interested in these things. And then from there, we started to build the circle of friends around Kate. Then we built the family around Kate, and then we built the town around Kate. And I just said, don't name the town because that comes up later, but let's talk about the town. And then I was like, well, okay, if this is, a modern version of, Biff running the world, and then we talked about how we felt about, like, companies coming in and security and all that stuff. So really everything stemmed from the creation of the character and the decision on where to go after that. Which I'm not used to doing. Usually I just have the plot and I say, okay, you jump in and this is going to happen whether you like it or not. Not forcing a player to do something, but rather the villain's plans are in motion and stop the villain, stop the antagonist,
right.
Stop this
I mean,
bad.
you can know somebody's a Ghostbuster, and therefore the outline of their career is at least clear.
Right. And when we're doing, when I ran games outside of, Omniverse, like I ran an Indiana Jones game, it's like, all right, travel from point A to point B through the jungle, don't die. Like, it's, it's pretty simple, So this was the most free-form, open world, open sandbox, however you want to put it, thing that I'd ever run. It was also the most intensive with research and planning, and on top of all of that, trying to run live music and sound effects all at the same time, intentionally spreading myself thin.
Yeah,
just to see.
Really incredible feat, truly. Like,
Thanks.
It's just a marvel, like, watching you work and feeding off of that, and playing with that.
Well, the only thing that kept me from going crazy was that it was fun.
Right.
I mean, if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't have done it, because it takes a lot. I mean, anyone who's DM'd could hopefully sympathize with the idea that, okay, I'm not only running this, but I'm also having to keep you talking, or at least keep talking to give you more information, at the same time pulling up information on the computer in front of me, and then, oh wait, here's a great moment to play a sound effect, let's whatever.
Yeah.
And then that's coming a little too loud, let me try and minimize it. But again, we all knew this was an experiment when we started, so I was like, forgive me ahead of time, I'm probably gonna hit a couple speed bumps, but
sure.
Hit it.
The model's not to scale.
Sure.
Apologies.
It all worked out.
Yeah. Well. Okay. So in terms of it being an experiment, in terms of your goals for it as an experiment, obviously we've said it was successful.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you feel that you learned?
I learned a lot about how I run a game. Not necessarily. I don't think any of the lessons I learned are like, oh yeah, you could totally apply this to any gaming scenario. But for me, I really enjoyed doing a duet because it was high energy pretty much the whole time. It felt really collaborative in building the story as it went, and I just really enjoyed that. Running the effects and music at first was really difficult, but then eventually I just had a bed of reliable stuff that I could just pull from, so it became easier as it went along, but still was like enough of a, whatever. I realized that, every time we sat down, I've always said it, I always freak out and think, oh, I'm not prepared enough. There's something missing from this scenario. I know we're in this decade, or we're in this particular year, and I know kind of how it begins. I know maybe how it ends, but there's a big chunk in the middle I don't quite know. And then I'd always just tell myself, all right, dude, relax. the player comes in and fills in that gap. The player is going to decide where we're going to go.
Right.
Let's just do what we do and provide answers to questions. And Kate is going to be driving the story, and that worked. I'd always freak out a little bit and be like, I don't know if I'm ready. You know what? I think we're ready. And then we just did it, and it was fine. I don't think we ever hit a moment where I was kind of like, I don't know what happens right now. Because if we did, I would have just ended the story. I'd been like, all right, and we're done for the night. But we always ended at a spot where I knew was like, all right, this is cliffhangery enough. Let's stop here and we can continue later. So yeah, for me, it was more about learning about my own preparation. How much should I do? How much confidence should I have doing this versus this? Definitely had some more emotional moments than I was used to having. I'm usually more action focused or combat focused or whatever. Not for like min-maxing or anything, but rather just cinematic action, fun, plot moving forward all the time.
Right.
There was a lot of fun opportunities to sort of sit back and dive into characters and stuff. And I, more than any other time I've run a game, I found myself jumping between characters in quick succession that have different thoughts and opinions on things, and interacting with Kate in different ways that
it was so fluid. Like it never felt wrong. It never felt like, oh, this is like, we're at random villager number 2 now. And
right.
They're just like trying to disseminate that the dragon is weak to this without really saying that. And
right. And it took a bit for me to like jump into, and I think it's just I like how it challenged me to have answers for characters from different time periods and reacting to Kate in different ways. Whereas normally it's like, Ghostbusters, thank goodness you're here. Here's the problem. Goodbye until the end,
Yeah.
Thank you. Here's the money. Goodbye. And again, that's not to, crap on the work that it takes to actually make Ghostbusters fun and funny, because that's a whole other skill set. But yeah, this was very different from what I was used to doing, and I felt validated in that, yeah, we can do that. So I feel like I'm not going to be as timid in the future about taking bigger risks on maybe more emotional things. I'm pretty roleplay heavy anyway, but like pushing that further. Like I won't be as timid about wondering if I could pull something off, because this went way longer than expected, was way more emotional than expected, and made more sense than expected. So it was a complete
What does
success.
that mean, made more sense than expected?
I didn't know if it would just get off the rails at some point. I didn't know if it would get so convoluted that you were no longer making choices. The second most bottlenecked portion of the entire game, the first being, how do we get Kate inside the fridge?
Right.
The second was, once Kate and Doc had palled around for a while long enough, I'm like, at some point Doc has to leave and go on the adventure of Back to the Future Part 2. And once that happens, he's not going to see her until after Part 3. He's going to be busy the entire time. So I knew that would happen at some point. And since Kate's, still hanging around and it's the future, she's going to have to help him, take care of Marty Jr. while Marty McFly is pretending to be his own son in Cafe 80s. And at that point, Doc had to be like, hey, you need to stand here, you need to walk over there, you need to do this, and then we're going to save the world. So that sort of, I hope didn't feel like I was taking too much agency away from Kate, but that was just the only other time that I felt was like, I kind of have to force her to do this thing, even though, Kat out of character knows like what's going on.
Right. Hey, it was rough to hear that, like, like all those months that I spent trying to help Marty Jr., like, there was nothing I could do.
Well,
that wouldn't fuck things over so badly.
Well, that to me, that was the point to make it interesting, was that, yeah, you do help Marty Jr. and you did save him and you did prevent all that stuff, but all you did was redirect all you did was inherit the bad problem of Griff and the gang.
Right.
And to me, that was like in line with what I was trying to do story-wise, where it's about, yeah, even with the time machine, you can't stop every bad thing from happening. Like,
right.
There's always going to be a problem, and you think, if I just go back and fix it again, well, if I just go back and fix it again, even if you get it right each of those times, trouble just shifts around, like water. You won't be able to really stop it. And if you go back and shoot Hitler as a baby, like, okay, maybe you stopped Hitler, but I don't think you stopped, Goebbels or any of the other bad people who, sure, get into a World War II topic, but like many other bad things could probably still happen,
Yeah. And what's worse is if you're trying to actively do anything, or even exist if you come from like the 21st century, then congratulations, you've disrupted any sense you have of knowing what's going on ever.
Yeah. There's this. This sounds a little bit off topic, but I think I had thought of this moment before, especially on the topic of do you shoot Hitler? There's a movie with Sam Elliott called The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot, and it's a silly title, and it's kind of a silly movie too. It's a B movie sci-fi thing where Sam Elliott it's in the 1980s. He's an old soldier, special forces guy, and they hire him to go kill Bigfoot. And the reason why they hire him to do this is because he's known as the guy who killed Hitler. And the whole world is like, what do you mean? Hitler shot himself in the bunker. And it's like, no, actually Sam Elliott killed this guy, and who we know as Hitler was an imposter until the end of the war. And this guy from the CIA is asking him, like, is it true? Like, did you really kill Hitler? And it's the scene from Jaws where Quint tells the Indianapolis story. It's the best, most dramatic moment of the entire film, and very well written, where he basically says, yeah, I killed Hitler. And I knew that there'd be no parade. I knew that there'd be no celebration or whatever. Then after I returned to base, you know what I found out? They had an impersonator just up there doing it. Nobody knew. And the war continued like normal. All the sacrifices we made to get me close enough to actually do that, it didn't matter. So we sent out another team, killed him again. Same thing happened again. You know, they just replaced him again and again and again, because true evil, you can't kill it. You know, like it wasn't about the man.
Right.
It was the movement. That was the enemy. And we didn't realize that until it was too late. And I'm like, whoa, that for this weird ass movie, that's a great little speech, you know. I mean, I just butchered it, you know, but he delivers it really well. And I'm like, wow, that's a great, interesting thought. So with a time machine, going back and trying to make these changes, it's like, yeah, maybe you prevented this thing from happening, but there's always going to be a bad thing happening somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
And having Kate, I never wanted Kate to feel punished for like making a decision. I didn't want you to feel out of character, like I'm punishing you as a player. Where it's like, you're trying to ruin the continuity, so punish you. But rather, hopefully get the takeaway of, no, we did do that, and things are better for them, but now it affects me. And if I go back and try and change it again, it might go back and hurt them. So like weighing the lesser of two evils, you know, of like, what's this going to do? And then Doc proposing, oh, we have a third option. Well, we just etch-a-sketch the entire thing and, you know, get Marty in here and try and do a switcheroo and not involving them. If they're none the wiser, then maybe, you know.
Yeah.
Again, so trying to think of Back to the Future-y ways around problems, while at the same time not just making it a walk in the park for Kate where it's like, you did good, you saved the day, congratulations, keep going. And at the same time, it can't just be, oh, here's another, you know, terrible thing that fell out of the sky and you have to deal with, and it's just a miserable trek the entire time. Yeah, I don't know. For me, there's a lot of film storytelling woven into it, but trying to leave, against my instincts as a screenwriter, leaving a lot of holes in there for someone else's input, you know, to make the story happen.
Yeah.
Were there any unresolved story things that you're like, hey, wait a minute, what about this thing? What was that thing about?
At this point, it's all kind of a blur, so that's really challenging, like being in there so much. So like in terms of like having questions about what was X or Y thing about, more so that I know how over prepared you were. So I'm curious about that. I'm also curious like what you thought when Kate started seeing reacting to the Back to the Future, like cyclical meeting people that you have a connection to thing, and like and then her in world feeling like, oh, there's some kind of like narrative engine like compelling, because I recognize that I was breaking the fourth wall a bit there, but also that Kate, having seen these circumstances again and again and again, like, I mean, it would call that into question.
It made sense to me that Kate would think that. I don't think I wasn't trying to convey the idea that there's a destiny or that there's a bigger plan in place. This wasn't quite like Quantum Leap, you know, where it's like someone is choosing where you're going. But her bringing up that question, I think, is good and fitting. But even Doc doesn't fully understand. Like this, the time machine is experimental. I mean, the whole he's here to learn how time works. So the whole thing is very mushy. You know, the whole thing is we're still learning how, like, learning how time's supposed to work. And in my own mind, I tried to figure out, okay, well, based on the rules that we see in the film, how do we really think this works? Like, why does some things affect certain change and some things are left more questionable? And, and then I thought of it being like a river, and if you're like moving through it, if you throw a stone in and it disrupts something, you're not sure how it'll tumble, sort of chaos effect, like the butterfly effect. There's no 100% real way to guarantee a lot of things unless you have the almanac and you burn it, like then no one else is going to read it. But I had a very soft sort of rule in my head of that the bigger the change, the wider the effect, obviously. But at the same time, because people point out, it's like, how come like old Biff can fade away or other people can fade away? Why does the newspaper stay in your hands, but the ink changes? Shouldn't the entire newspaper be gone? Because why would you have brought it with you if it had nothing to do with you?
Right.
And to me, it was more about not that time or existence is a living consciousness, but rather it's organic and it will repair itself in the easiest possible way. Like removing matter from a time space over here, removing a newspaper so that matter, that energy is gone. It's not existent. Well, if matter can neither be created nor destroyed, maybe the idea being that the matter is still there, the ink is still there, the ink has just changed. You know what I mean? As opposed to like vanishing and whatever. That's just, I mean, again, I don't know if that makes any sense in the real world, but to me it was like, okay, well, that's enough of an explanation to where, we could explain why certain things are here or they're not.
How did you feel about Kate's lack of agency early on?
I was a little concerned about it, and the fact that I was like, oh yeah, she is like 17 years old. Like I thought that I had failed to take into account that she's 17 years old, and this is an insane situation. So of course, a young person would feel out of control and feel like, what am I even doing? This is so dangerous. I need to, this guy invented the time machine. I'm going to just defer to whatever he says. But then when I because Marty McFly, but then again, Marty and Doc have a relationship the going into it, so that's different. But I realized Kate only when playing it did I realize, oh yeah, Kate really doesn't have the relationship that she can bounce off of. She's alone floating through time until she figures out Doc's involved and everything else, and then immediately she meets and he's just some kooky guy. It's not her friend that she's known. Like she has nothing really to rely on. But then I realized, okay, well then this is the story of how Doc and Kate become friends, and this is the story of how Kate sort of gains agency. This is how she gets confident. Not that she wasn't confident.
She was
in
functionally
herself.
like, and one of her stunts was being a big fish, or aspects was being a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah,
and that's all good and well when she knows the pond,
right? And this is the ocean.
Yeah,
this is outer
so
space.
As soon as she went in that fridge, it was gone.
Yeah, and the hesitancy of her and everything else, it all made complete sense. But that's when I realized, okay, the game is going to change a little bit. Not, nothing major, but just enough to where it's like, okay, this is Kate needs help along the way. But I knew I had faith that you would get to the point where you're like, I've got this.
Right.
And that's why, the Kate ziplining down to fight who she thinks is Eli, and everything else is like, it's not the same person,
Yeah.
It's not that Kate doesn't like to stand up for herself. It's just that there, once Kate had been in a shootout with outlaws, been robbed at gunpoint in the Old West, met and palled around with Calamity Jane, and witnessed a future where everything is gone.
If there was a gun in that scenario, she would have tried to get it and probably made somebody dance.
Yeah. Like it's once enough big things happen to you, even just knowing that the future is doomed and you have to stop it, you have to prevent it, knowing all the lives that are at stake, like a mini mini Sarah Connor, where it's like, I've seen it, I know what happens, like I have to save the world. Suddenly neighborhood gangs, they ain't shit, there's so much more important stuff happening. Gaining perspective, that was the whole point. Kate gains perspective, not just on her hometown, but also family, on friends, new perspective every time she makes a time jump.
Speaking of perspectives and that particular scene, we glossed over it, I think, importantly, because it's very hard to explain, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on what does Kyron and Jimmy and Eli, etc., think about Like, how do they process the inexplicable nature of Kate disappearing in a fridge that seemed very strange, reappearing in a completely different outfit with a completely different haircut, and being a completely different person?
I mean, the way I'd imagined it, I mean, we didn't get to talk about it because you were kind of like, you made it clear that Kate wasn't talking. She was doing a lot of listening at this point. But in my mind, they were just sort of so relieved that Kate was fine, that this was probably just some sort of like weird kooky magic trick. You know, like that this was some sort of weird trapdoor scenario. Kate's dropped into a thing. Like, I mean, you see magicians do this shit all the time.
Sure.
And this is a
But
weird...
Kate's not a magician.
No, sure. But this is just a weird device. And you had the attitude of like, I'll explain it later. And like them being almost get the shit beat out of them by Griff and his gang, which I could... And the more, I mean, again, I know the scenario being that they, you know, like I kind of hinted at was that Kate wanted to take photos, so she asked her brother Kyron to ask his buddy Jimmy to let them in to check out the mall. So Jimmy, like, legally, well, I guess maybe not completely legally, but like with keys, you know, they didn't break in, let them in at night to take some photographs before the thing gets torn down. Eli and Jimmy are friends, so Eli and Jimmy are just hanging out. It's like, hey, let's go do a thing really quick. And of course, Eli probably also knows Kyron. In my mind, they're all like, just because they're all of similar age, they probably already know each other, whether it's neighborhood friends or whatever. So this was them Kate's just doing a quick favor, and the three of them are hanging out somewhere else. Kate's wanders off by herself, goes to take photos. Just so happens that Griff and his gang are there to steal, and then there's a confrontation, and they're like, well, we can't let anyone see us, so lock this kid in this fridge. Oh wait, Kyron comes in, he wants to save his sister. Lock him in this box over here. And as shit's about to hit the fan, boom, the flash of light, loud noise, Kate disappears, and all of her friends think like, oh my gosh, was that a microwave oven? Like, you know, what was this? Is she dead? But then Kate, as we know her, zips down really quick out of nowhere, and there's hardly any time to try to make sense of what happened.
Right.
Especially since Kate is like, I'll explain later. I don't want to talk about it. Let's just get out of here. Let's just go home. And clearly is familiar with these people, but you played it off like you knew that they were, you know what I mean? Like playing off that they weren't strangers to you. You weren't like, who am I? Where is this?
At first I thought I was like telling Eli to fuck off, and then I realized like, oh, Eli's not the bad guy.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Right. But that's part of that was just part of the fun of it.
And I like the like that by some virtue of like other factors, you know, maybe just like the world being slightly better, you know, Eli didn't end up being a bad guy. Like,
yeah, give someone a different childhood completely. Who the hell knows, you know, what happens?
Yeah, I thought that was nice. Was there anything that would have been different if I had not said, yeah, Doc, you know what? Because we came so close to doing the Marty Jr. storyline before we went to the future. Would anything have changed there? Like, were there any major shifts at that particularly critical decision point?
Depends on where you wanted to go. Like, if you said, let's go to the future, well, you did say, let's go to the future first. Or if you said, oh, let's fix Marty Jr. first, is what you're saying?
Yeah, we said we were angled towards that. And then eventually, like, Doc and I were talking, and we were like...
And he's like, well, let's take... Yeah, where do you want to go? Yeah.
And I was like, you know, actually, like, yeah, let's go even farther, and then we'll circle back.
If you decided to help Marty Jr. first, I think... I mean, there's no way of knowing how you would have played it, but I imagine the situation would have been much the same, with an attempt at... I mean, for all I knew, you could have been like, hey, I don't want to befriend Marty Jr. I don't know if I should get involved with the McFly family. Maybe we should just not let them know we're here. Maybe observe what happens and try and change it. Again, you were in the driver's seat of that.
Right.
So it's hard for me to answer like what would have happened. But I do think that if you were successful, and you were identified by Griff's gang, much the same thing would have happened. The attention would have been focused on you as opposed to Marty, because Marty's just some pipsqueak, but you're a troublemaker, you know? So if you're like involving yourself with the gang, or maybe I didn't know, I was trying to prepare for you were like, hey, I'm a tough person, let me in on this gang. And you know, like, and like, I thought
there was that whole like meeting I didn't show up to.
Yeah, I thought maybe, I didn't know, I was prepared, I was mentally trying to prepare in case you were trying to legitimately get recruited into the gang just so that you could screw them over when they pulled off the heist. And there was a lot of shit that could have happened if you
can we talk about those working paths, because that was a really, I mean, there were a lot of,
I mean, there's not much to tell. I'll tell you, like, there's not much to tell because it all would have depended on what you'd done. Like, It wasn't like you have 3 options and I can tell you what the other 2 were. It's that I was thinking, okay, if Kate decides to put on some swagger and say, "Hey, let me in the gang," I have an idea on how they could respond. And if you win them over, yeah, you're in the gang. And they're going to assume you're in the gang, and let's do this job. If you decide to betray them or not, or steal the money from them, or notify the cops, I didn't know what you would have done, so it's hard for me to really say. But I had a contingency in place of, like, if you did decide to go on them, what was the plan? Like, the plan is to knock over the money from the Hill Valley, like, payroll, and then what did they do after that? And in my mind, I'm like, okay, they probably hopped on one of the all night hover trains and went into LA or San Francisco and laid low for a couple days, so you get to see a futuristic city,
right?
And if you whether you betrayed them or not, I don't know what would have happened. Like, if you decided to betray them and there was a fight, now you're lost in a giant San Francisco, LA futuristic, Blade Runner-esque, city chase. Is there going to be a hover car chase through the skyline, like Attack of the Clones? I don't know. But I was thinking of all these different possibilities if you chose to go in a certain direction.
And you would have been, had it gone that way, you would have been prepared for that in that session based on just a couple bullet points.
Yeah, because for me, it's just because for me, it was just all I really had to know was what was the plan to steal it and what were they going to do for the next couple days.
Right.
The rest of it could fall into place depending on what you wanted to do.
That was a tough choice for me because I saw that there were a lot of options, and I knew what I was doing was I was like, I am taking such a safe option here. This is not what Marty would do. This is not what would be in a film. Like, this is Kate just trying to, like, logically stop a bad thing from happening.
Right.
And I felt self-conscious about that. I mean, obviously I did it anyway, but
go with your gut.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I am Kate, and then I'm also not Kate, and trying to figure out where she's at mentally is a little bit difficult, especially from, like, at that point, the breakdown that she had in the middle of, like, being flung into the post-apocalyptic future, and then how she bounced back from that because of kind of being able to, like, create a normal life for a little while.
The illusion of one, at least.
Yeah, and so she was kind of, like, not ready to parlay with monsters again.
Yeah.
Because that didn't go well to begin with. Because she was like, no one ever believes me anyway. Like it's always or even if they do, then it's like things like with Eli where, like, it was confusing. It was these are confusing times.
That's all really true. But I think the interesting thing is that, yeah, if you tried to play tough with Eli, he would call you on that bullshit.
Right.
But by the time you get to the end of this story, it's not bullshit. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like, you actually have that look in your eye. Like, you actually have that presence of don't fuck with me because I've been through too much shit to get here. And that does have an effect on people's reactions.
Yeah, which leaves Kate in a really interesting spot. I've been thinking about this. We're recording this the day after we concluded the show, and I personally have some issues with being abandoned, and Kate has been abandoned quite a bit. And so the idea of Doc, like, being like, here's a scholarship, fuck off to your normal life, not 100% clear whether he was doing that or not. Obviously, he's got a family, he's got distractions, he's got plans. He's Kate's friend, but she's not sure where his priorities are. He comes back, he's like, well, I've been gone for what would be 7 years. Like,
yeah.
That's a lot. And Kate's not sure, like, can I trust you to, like, not, and also I'm thinking in the metagame, like, I read the comic books. I know that Marty McFly dealt with post-traumatic stress syndrome or different aspects of post-traumatic stress because of having lived this, like, life or death scenario for, like, whatever duration of time Back to the Future 1 through 3 takes place in.
Yeah.
And then he tried to go back to a normal life, and he was like, I can't fucking do this. Like, I'm not a normal kid anymore.
Yeah. And he was only Marty has only been traveling through time in terms of the movies. I think he spent a week in 1955.
Mm-hmm.
He spent, like, Back to the Future 2 was, like, over 24 hours. And Back to the Future 3, he's there for, like, another week, I think.
Right. And Kate's, like, a lifetime by comparison.
Kate's has been, like, almost 3 months, maybe more. Like, yeah, no, almost, like, 2. I think she's been gone for almost 4 months. We could do the math, and I'm sure but it's a lot.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You didn't have a home to return to. You never felt comfortable in a future 2016. Where would you go? You know what I mean? And so that's the difference. Marty wants to go home. He has a home. Like he has a destination.
Yeah, being a time orphan is a very interesting feeling.
Yeah. And I felt bad that, because I didn't know that you felt like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, scholarship's great, but is this a signal for me to leave him alone? Like, am I being abandoned again? Because in my mind, Doc and Kate are friends for life, because there's.
I mean, that's what Kate would hope for, but
right.
but
like
Kate and I are both really like, please don't do that to me again. Like I've been because things happen with like time machines, aka like men and people in power and different stuff, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, even Doc asking Kate to stay in 2016 for a little while and wait for him to come back in a couple of days, more than she anticipated, was still like, oh no, what's going to go wrong? What's going to go wrong, and how is this going to affect me, and how am I going to have to jump through some crazy hoops to get out of this?
Right. I mean, and I think that was kind of the point, is that Kate, the final challenge for Kate is that she's kind of gun shy of all the trauma that's happened. The last thing that happened to you before Doc says, all right, watch Annie, I'm gone, you were chased by terrorists, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in my mind, that's intentional to get you to that point where it's like, you want me just to sit here and watch the dog we were just shot at.
I'm not a dog sitter. I'm a time traveler.
It's like I don't feel safe anywhere. Like every time we go somewhere, something bad happens. And he's just like, you have to trust me. I'm going to work on this. I'm going to come right back. It'll be okay. And that's one of the hardest things. Like, I feel like emotionally, that's one of the hardest things that you had to do. And you're like, I'm just going to keep checking on Einstein, making sure he's okay. You know, and yeah, Einstein's there. He's happy. The being thrust back into normalcy and being asked to drop it so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she kind of felt a little betrayed from that, because it was like, but Doc, it should be you and me out there living 7 years in the past, like building this thing or whatever. Like, I don't know, like, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
But then she kind of does.
Yeah. But then I think, Doc had the life experience at that point to know that you being there ultimately, because, well, yes, your age, but also just like, now that the world was a little more familiar, that you could exist there, and if he gave you time and let like your memories start to catch up with you, I think he trusted that it would work. Like that, not that you'd be like, oh, I love it here, but rather just like, I understand it more, I'm not really afraid of it. But that the lesson Doc learned himself only after being in the Old West for like a year and a half was the lesson he gave to you at the end. It's like every time it's like, this isn't my time, is this my people? It's like, but it can be if you just have to not give in to something, but you have to like bring your life to it. You have to, you can make it yours, because there is a space here for you. In theory, if you wanted to live in 2016 and you're like, no, I really want to live in this futuristic 2016, I don't want to bounce around, Doc probably would have found a way to carve out a space for you. Like whether that means going back in time and making a fake birth certificate or whatever that looks legit by the time you're there, and you want to just live doing whatever, he probably could have done that.
Right.
You know, but I don't think Doc at that time in his character arc would have thought that was a great idea. But once Doc has lived in the Old West for that long and started a family of his own in a place that he never thought he would be, raising a family that he never thought he would have, working with technology that he's not familiar with having, and seeing how he adapted and he evolved and found happiness, I think he had no doubt that you could find happiness wherever you ended up. But he probably felt that this was a good spot for you because you do have family here. And with Kate, the previous Kate, disappearing in that time chamber, in my mind, just dissolved, and that's why you have these memories. Like, so that Kate still technically exists and never died, is not like missing, but is like you're being folded in. Yeah.
I mean, there's something a little bit paternalistic about Doc making those decisions on Kate's behalf, but at the same time,
he's like 80 years old.
Yeah, at the same time, like, of course he's doing that, like, in terms of character work, and which is why Kate made the point at the end of being like, you come back tomorrow. I want to see if you, like, you know, you're good to your word, and then and also like asserting like, I'm a time traveler, because I mean, as far as granted, but like by that moment in time, I was thinking like, I do actually have things really good here. Like I have friends and I have family in a way that I both had and haven't before. There is a reason to be here. There is stuff I'm curious about. This isn't like, even though there's another like crazy person in the Oval Office that has nothing to do with like who I'm with and all that. And maybe that's one more problem that I can help solve one way or another. And it felt really good. So even when the time came for Kate to like assert like, no, I am a time traveler, I was still, and I guess she was still like questioning like, is that what I want? But then the reality is, I mean, she could find happiness in either place.
Yeah.
But it is also something where she's like, she wants the chance to maybe, if even such a thing is possible, like, because clearly Doc and his family think it's possible to go out into the cosmos and to learn new and incredible things, because that's what she's been doing all along, because her photo album is indicative of that.
Yeah.
Like Kate's greatest work as an artist has been traveling through time and you know and seeing things like the only way that she can, because she's an artist. And whether or not she can share that with anybody or come up with some kind of way to make that a part of like what she does as a I don't know, for the benefit of anybody but other than herself, who can say? But, you know, like, because when will Doc Brown do something to the benefit, in terms of with time travel, to the benefit of anybody other than himself, in a way that obviously he doesn't need recognition. Like, recognition is not important. He and Kate have both saved the world many times over. But at what point, if this is the moment where they both achieve domesticity, and Brown Industries exists, maybe Brown Industries exists in the same way that it exists in Back to the Future: The Ride. Is that right? I don't know.
I almost did a joke of just like, because I thought if you were going to ask like, so what now? You're just going to live? You're going to live on a farm? He's like, I don't know. I was thinking about maybe making a foundation or an institute of future technology. You know, I don't know. Maybe in Los Angeles or Orlando. I haven't decided. Just I thought that'd be too cartoonish. But just the joke that all of these timelines can exist.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, in terms of the timeline, you've done some really interesting stuff. You showed me some clips. You had me watch a bunch of different clips of the film last night, and it's really interesting, like watching Back to the Future in context of Kate Was Here. It's weird because, you know, the ways the films are made, those are Marty's stories. And the way that Kate Was Here's narrative is so windy and twisty, then it's hard to be like, okay, so this is what was happening with Kate at this moment here because of this. Yeah. But there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. For example, you accidentally solved a continuity error with the time circuits.
Yeah. It was one, because I remember I mentioned, I think it's in one of the pre-sessions or post-sessions, where I'm like, I may have accidentally fixed a plot hole that I didn't know was a thing until we were playing the game. And that's at the beginning of Back to the Future Part 2, when Doc picks up Marty and Jennifer and they arrive in 2015. It's raining and they're in the sky, and Marty's like, where are we? When are we? And he's like, we're descending towards Hill Valley and it's a close-up shot of the time circuits, and he says October, whatever, 2015. And if you look at the time circuits, not the display, not the LED like display, but the metal framing around it and like the labeling on it, it's all beat to shit, and it's all like worn down and all kind of grungy looking. And then an hour later into the movie, when they're traveling back to 1985 or wherever they're going, or if they're going 1955, it's clean. It looks fairly new. And I remember thinking like, well, what the hell? Like, why? That's a glaring continuity error. Like, for this movie that usually is so exact and precise with how things look and how things are or whatever. I mean, Lone Pine Mall, Twin Pines Mall. It's like, come on.
That's a weird precision that is unique to the series.
How could they miss that? And why was it that gunked up? I hadn't thought about that.
Why would the prop have been made to look that way?
Right. And the only thing is that maybe if that was an insert shot that they filmed later, and I don't know. I have no idea. I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation in reality for when filming the movie why it was like that, because it may have been filmed late in the game. I don't know.
Like during Back to the Future 3.
Maybe, yeah. Who knows? So there could be any reason. But story-wise, there was no reason. And then I had realized while I was watching clips from the movie trying to prepare for a later game, we were already in the middle of playing this game, that DeLorean with the grungy, gunked up time circuits, from, if you include Kate Was Here continuity, those time circuits are from the DeLorean that they found in 2049 post-apocalyptic future that had been in the wasteland for 20 years. And Doc disassembled these parts, and he like Frankensteined that DeLorean that they're currently sitting in. And then as that movie progresses, you could say that the time ripple effect happens and it diverts back to one of regular working order, because they've avoided going there. They've
Right.
avoided going to that future thing. So I'm like, wow, that's a neat little. Okay, no one else cares, but I noticed. Like,
Yeah,
and
well done.
It cleaned it up completely by accident, but still fun things. And while showing you some of those clips last night, it just reminded me of so many other threads that I laid down that you were like, yeah, but there's more important stuff over here. And it was right. I think ultimately focusing on once Kate sees that the world's going to end at a certain point, all bets are kind of off. So I guess to answer your question from earlier of like, well, what if I decided to save Marty first? I'm like, well, if you were exploring that area, you maybe would have picked up on those threads and they would have seemed more important to you at the time until you eventually maybe made it to a post-apocalyptic place.
Right.
But because you went to the post-apocalyptic place first, suddenly all the other stuff doesn't mean as much. But that's fine, and that's the nature of the game. That's why we were playing this.
Yeah.
You know?
One of the coolest things that you showed me that like absolutely blew my mind and is always going to warm my heart whenever I watch Back to the Future 2 is that Chiron's tag is in the alley sequence when they ditched Jennifer in Back to the Future 2. It's like, you obviously you lifted it from the film for the game, but like, it's great. Like that graffiti served no purpose whatsoever in the film. It was just something that someone did for the set dressing, and now it has like meaning and connection and warms my heart.
I'm going to tell you, you have no idea.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
That the graffiti tag and everything Chiron was doing was a thread you never really picked up on.
Shit, tell me.
Depending on when and where you did stuff. Remember when Kate went to go buy the phone and it's like, oh, you can take photos. It's like geocaching. You can take a photo and maybe there'll be a video attached.
Oh, yeah.
Kate never took a photo of any of the tags and looked up like what video it was. Like she never investigated what Chiron was doing. And these were all going to be like little vlogs that would have given Kate insight to what Chiron was up to, what this kid was like, who is my brother. And Kate never really knew it because she didn't. I figured, well, in case Kate doesn't want to talk to her brother and sound like a crazy person, this is a way for her to get to know what is this world like, what is the family life like. This is an easy way to do that. But you didn't. You didn't do it, and that's fine. That's totally fine. And everything with Kate's dad, like Kate's dad was off the grid, missing.
Right.
There's a whole thing that was happening with Kate's dad and with Chiron and the mom. Like there's a whole family history there. That you're just kind of like, what's going on over there? Don't got time for it. We have to move on. And it was right for you to do so, given the circumstance, with what was really important and what was at stake.
So how did Kate's dad die in the last timeline?
It's easier to say to start further back where Kate's dad, after the divorce happened, Kate's dad not only got more religious as per like how he was in the 2016 that you knew, he joined like a commune of hippies, shaved his head, and was wearing I had a name for them. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm going to try and find it really quick. He joined this new age religious movement. They are like free love, free everything, complete 180.
Dad, that's not what I expected.
Well, yeah. It was a complete 180 of what he was as you knew him. And I need to find, because I made some brief notes. Again, these are just brief notes in case the question comes up.
Sure, yeah.
But it never really quite, the group that he joined were known as the Free and Joyful Followers of the Everlasting Sun.
Okay.
They are like, I describe them as hedonistic Hare Krishna on shrooms.
Wow.
He likes to go around, him and the group, he goes around shirtless, playing a tambourine with a group of people
I
down the
saw
street.
them in the background of Back to the Future 2.
Yeah,
for the first time. I never noticed them before until I watched it last night because I'm not used to seeing it in HD or full screen or widescreen for that matter. But
that's them. That's the Free and Joyful Followers of the Everlasting Sun.
Jesus fucking Christ.
And unfortunately, where he eventually died was and one of the tenets that they have is like, oh yeah, we have no ties to the material plane. All people are related. So if you were to confront him, you were trying to find him, he would just be like, oh, Kate, hello. But you're like, he would treat you and love you the same way he would treat a complete stranger. You're not a stranger to him. He knows you.
Right.
But to the stranger on the street, he would try to hug and love a stranger on the street just the same way that he would you. So in fact, what would seem to be loving and all accepting of people's flaws, it feels very impersonal to you as a daughter, would be the idea.
Right.
he died in I think he died in 2023 at the age of 57.
Yeah.
While him and some of the followers were trespassing in the Fusion Industries junk fields outside town, trying to make their own little community out there, and a pile of junk collapsed onto them and crushed several of them. So it was like this thing of like, well, that's why we can't have trespassers here, because weird ass hippies will come in trying to make their own little commune, and out of like recycle the junk in a positive way and not just dump it into the fusion thing. And you wouldn't have bumped into him there, but that ultimately would have been like that was his fate, being so divorced literally and symbolically, like from his family, that he went and lived in a fucking junkyard with strangers until it crushed him.
Well, good for him.
Yeah.
That's better than being like a miserable hate monger or something.
Oh, sure. But at the same time, even though he's not a hate monger, there was no love for you, like no real, it was
well,
that
I'm used to it.
but yeah, trying to show the differences, trying to show like whatever. And Kate's mom traveling the world, kind of becoming, I think I even referred to her in the game as a TV mom. Where early on she's been traveling, and Chiron and Kate kind of taking care of each other growing up.
Right.
And of course Kate, Chiron's not old enough to be a dad, so he just does the best that he can, which is why Kate ends up being kind of starved for attention, because mom and dad are gone. What the hell? Yeah. So there's lots of stuff. Chiron eventually marrying Lana, I believe was her name. Another interesting thing, Lana's from Vietnam. You saw advertisements in Back to the Future 2 for Surf Vietnam. Apparently we're on really good relations with Vietnam in that version of the future.
Oh, wow. Boy.
Yeah.
Everything in that alleyway is important.
Yeah. Well, it's not just the alleyways, on the street and on the billboards and on the, like everywhere. But yeah, I was just trying to soak up as many, because here's the thing. When it comes to 2016 Back to the Future, we really only know the jokes. And
Right.
I'm like, what is this world like? So I read the newspaper, someone copied the text online. You could like read more of the articles. Queen Diana, that was a thing. It never came up, but I knew that was a thing. There's also a Canine Sports Network starring Maddie the dog, who is a border collie who got a 2-hour biography special. Like it's insane. Like there's a number of awesome, insane. Like there's all these different TV channels. There's the Atrocity Channel. There's advertisements on Marty Jr.'s TV about like local things. There's
Oh, you mean Fox News, the Atrocity Channel?
Well, we don't know what's on the Atrocity Channel, but it's but there was an advertisement for, oh god, I can't remember the name of the place, but it was like cosmetic surgery, basically like normalized cosmetic surgery, and there was it was advertising the inflatable tit on TV.
I saw that.
Yeah, that actually has a facade in the courthouse square.
Yeah.
And the idea, it never came up because you never talked to Chiron, but if you talked to Chiron, he'd be like, I think he mentioned it at one point. He goes, "Did you change your eye color again?" And the idea was that younger Kate was changing her eye color all the time, and her mom had told her that once she turned 18, she would allow her to go down to the place to get implants if she wanted it still. It was like, wait till you're 18, then see if you still want it, kind of thing. And she also wanted to go get her eyes changed there and like get her hair changed and all this other stuff. So like again, Kate of 2016 not having a solid identity and everything, which was what was part of the creep factor of it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of shit going on. That I overprepared for, but was fine because I wanted to have the answer in case you decided.
This is why I think you should have a book. That's why I think it should be like.
But this only applies to Kate.
It doesn't only apply to Kate because you have got this this assessment of like, look, here's all these things.
Yeah,
like you could
go on the
plug it
Back to the Future fan Wikipedia and still just do the homework. Like if you're going to run the game and not willing to do the homework, and you would read a PDF I gave you, that's still homework. It's just in a different form.
Oh well, I mean, but you've already done so much work of compressing it to the important parts.
Sure, I don't know. I mean, whatever. I mean, like, I think I'm more of an expert on ghostbusting than I am on time traveling. But
could have fooled me.
Yeah, but if anybody wanted to run a Back to the Future game or had questions, I would tell you how I feel about things and tell you how I think this works. I'd give you the equations that I had for Doc when he's trying to explain what the fuck kind of situation they were in and the ratio of time of how fast something will disappear. Or just make up the rules as you go along, like Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis did. There are other things like in 1885, if you decided not to go with Martha, and say, that sounds kind of risky. I think we need to focus on whatever, and we'll just cut our losses with the money.
Yeah.
And you went into San Francisco. There's a whole bunch of other things that could have happened there.
Right, like the balloon situation.
Yeah,
could have been involved in that.
You would have had to go to the circus, talk to. I don't remember the guy's name, but I made a name for the guy who is the performer who does it, and is just like he's an immigrant and is like English is a second language, so there would be a problem with that, and the idea that he is being mistreated by the circus and is like, screw them, they don't understand my profession, and I'm an artist. And then you'd have to be like, well, hey, if you're leaving the circus, maybe give us the boost. Oh, no, the balloon is mine. I'm an artist. I do. It's like, would you take away Michelangelo's paintbrush? Like just this. So the idea of like having to not necessarily shake this guy down, but like be like, yo, we really need this for science. And just fun interaction there, fun interaction on the docks, fun interaction with parachute if it's indeed the same person or if it's different people. Like so many opportunities. Going to the bank, trying to explain. I mean, granted, I don't want to make this the bank simulator. Like the stock market simulator. So Doc would always just go off and just take care of it, kind of thing.
Right.
But there's plenty of trouble to get up to in San Francisco. Also, if you made it to San Francisco, there could have been other bounties available, or maybe the Vogel brothers could have been seen in the area. Anything could have happened. I had nothing pinned down for sure because it was all based on what you decided to do.
Yeah.
The most that I was flying by the seat of my pants, probably literally making it up as we were going along, was once Kate and Martha had captured the two Vogel brothers and decided to go into Hayesville after the other brother. I didn't know what your plan was. I was like, all right, so you're just gonna go in there, you're gonna look for him, like we're trying to set up whatever. And the way things escalated to like a shootout was just sort of a natural progression based on the choices that you were making in those moments. Because if you were like that could have gone a million different ways. It could have just been whether he was winning or losing was depending on your reaction on looking at him. You know what I mean? Like there were so many, whether or not the people around him hated him or liked him, or whether they were strangers, or whether they were good guys or bad guys, or anything. All of it was up in the air for me, and I was just like, okay, well, Kat just decided to make Kate say this and this, so it's more. What's the more interesting challenge for her to deal with in this exact moment? Should this be easy or hard? Should she get what she wants, or should she be denied that? Should this be easy or hard? And doing that live was we're overclocking it. We're overclocking the brain, but it worked out great. I was super happy with how it turned out.
And how often were you overclocked?
To the point where I wasn't overclocked. I was never to the point where I was like exhausted. Like, I can't even. I just have to stop now. I can't. I couldn't possibly go on. I was never at that. I was never like burnt out.
Right.
But I was certainly like the rush and adrenaline of winging that scenario together leading up to the shootout, because I didn't know, because that sequence was a little stretched out where it's like, all right, he's getting up, he's getting ready to leave. Looks like there's going to be a shootout, and you're like, I'm just going to stand by and watch. And I'm like, all right, because the guns are about to come out. In case you want to do something. Do you want to do something? No, I don't want to do anything. Because again, I just want to provide you opportunities if you were going to do anything.
Right.
But me being on my toes in those moments was very rewarding afterwards. Be like, okay, well, now you got the money. You can go meet Doc. We kind of know how the rest of this is going to play out. We have a good plan. But like everything leading up to the shootout with, Eli Beretta's, ancestor, that was one of the more ones that got my heart pumping, because I'm like, oh, I want this to go well, and it's going well, but I don't know if Kat is going to say something that she wants to change suddenly. Like, I throw myself into the ring and I say, hey, wait a minute, let me, I don't know. I didn't know what you were going to do. So being there's a screenwriting adage I heard, which was, conflict is the essence of drama, but drama is anticipation mingled with uncertainty. So,
wow.
So the idea that, there's an anticipation of what's going to happen, what's about to happen. Oh my gosh, it's imminent. Something big is about to happen. What's it going to be? Was very dramatic and it pulled me in, just because it's like, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's roll the dice. Who wins the shootout? Holy shit. It could have gone either way. I was like, I'm kind of happy that the Beretta guy won, because if the Vogel brother won the shootout, it'd be like, holy fuck, like he got lucky. And what does this mean? Is he gonna then hop on a horse and try to get away from you? Is there gonna be another shootout? Anything could have happened.
Yeah, I absolutely would have taken the opportunity to, but see, the thing is I didn't know the Beretta guy. I didn't know if I start causing trouble with him,
it would have been bad.
Right, yeah. It seemed like it would have been. So I wasn't gonna, if he wants to to fuck with that Vogel brother, then great.
Yeah.
Do that. and I'll pick up the pieces afterwards. And it turns out the pieces that I picked up was that guy's body.
Brother. Yeah. Yeah. If you wanted to start shit with Beretta, it would have been, he's like Buford Tannen, but not stupid,
Yeah.
like
that's bad news.
Not a good look, but yeah, so many, like the drama of an Old West shootout heightened by the time travel element and everything else was, that was great. You were going to the Old West, and I didn't think about a shootout possibility with you, like a showdown.
Right.
I hadn't considered that. I'd think that's the last thing Kate would want to get caught up into, being at the end of a gun of, someone else who shoots way more often than she does,
Yeah, but I had it all. I had a very I really thought that that the Western thing. I don't know why I thought this, but I thought the Western sequence was gonna be more of an errand than like a life. But it was
because
a huge thing. It was transformative.
Well, you were under the assumption that you'd only have 4 hours.
Yeah.
So you're like, pop in,
I
pop
accepted
back
the
out.
possibility that somehow that wasn't going to be true, but
just a quick one, Morty. 30 minutes in and out, just like one and done. Just like no big deal. We're gonna hop in, hop back, nothing. And it's like, yeah, but your temporal flux field was locked in solid.
Yeah. So there's still so much to talk about with Kate Was Here. Like it's a deep well. It's hard to at this point, hard to remember everything that we've seen and done and gone through. And it's deeply affected me in ways that I'm still thinking about. And I think the end of our last episode says it all in a lot of ways. But
yeah,
there has been some interest with the folks who are following Kate Was Here. Knowing that we did record our last session, there's been some interest in a Q&A. So that's something that if you folks are interested, then still, by the time you hear this, then yeah, that's something we'd like to do. And we're going to take a whole month and a half, couple months break, during which we'll be in communication just following this. Keep an eye on Patreon for details as to like how we're going to do that. We love that there's that much, interest, and I'm sure that like right now I feel like I'm still pretty tired. It was a late night yesterday, so so I'm really curious what everybody's questions are. If we've, maybe we covered all of them, or maybe we haven't. But like, we'd love to talk with you folks about it. Really big time. Like, it means so much that people are listening and that that it's of interest. When we're doing episodes, it's all like me in a shopping mall in the future. I'm like, who's gonna care about this? But it's meant the world to me, and like playing this game, and it's really cool that it's something I can share with people. And I'm still finding words for this experience. I still can't really wrap my head around this experience or how to talk to people. Like, so I play this game that's like, it ran parallel with like a bunch of like different sort of transitional changes, but not like necessarily the obvious ones, like some other more complicated ones that like on an internal level and sort of an existential level. And then it started getting played out like through the character in a lot of different ways, but not the same ways it's playing out in my life, because the character itself, like, she's not trans. So like it's a whole like, it's so challenging to even set the stage to talk about this, and what it meant to me and why it meant what it meant, let alone anything else. So for those of you who have heard it, like, I'm deeply grateful, because that means that we actually have like we've shared something together that's really profound, and I'm looking forward to the prospect of talking with you about it. And Doug, this is not your last experiment. You're not done making experiments.
I'd like to do another duet sometime, whether it's with you or someone else. We'll figure that out. There are other surprise RPG experiments I want to run that are not Back to the Future related.
Or duets.
Or duets, even at that. This could be an ongoing fun thing. Like, I have ideas for situations that have 2 people, 4 people. I don't want to say any size, because that's, it's ridiculous. But you know what I mean? Like, flipping traditional expectation onto its head, sometimes involving an existing IP. Also ones that don't, to keep it like people really on their toes. If they start thinking, oh, what's this? Is this going to tie into Kate Was Here? And surprise, it's an original idea. You didn't think so, but here it is. And like, it's like, what more surprising than that, really? But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to be planning, and I know, Kat, you're going to help me work on a couple of them. So a lot of ideas that I had for future experiments I didn't share with you because what's the point if you know about it?
Right.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever these new things are, and this was a big one. I don't imagine I want to do another one quite as long as this.
We never could have guessed that it would be like that we'd ever be running 8-hour sessions on Kate Was Here, or that it would go into like over 30 episodes.
Because it was so focused on one character and her journey. That's why it did that. We had to see it through to the end.
Yeah.
The other experiments I want to run are a little more plot driven, not as much character driven, although characters are a really big part of any time you want to play an RPG.
And it's, the way, based on everything we've talked about today, I'm thinking like, you don't know. You don't know anything.
Oh, I don't know anything?
You do. You're extremely like you know how to work your craft.
Yeah.
When it comes to actually like you're like it's not going to be like it's not going to be X or Y or Z. Like
it could be anything because once you put the players in the driver's seat, literally anything.
Yeah,
can happen.
I feel like it's that's.
If you'd have asked me how I thought how Kate's story would end,
mm-hmm.
I would have guessed a couple things, but it wouldn't have been this.
What would you have guessed?
It depends on what point you asked me. If you asked me at the end of the first session, it'd be one thing. If you asked me, I would have thought that maybe. Because Kate was so reserved, I would have thought that maybe she'd be like, well, Doc, I'm going to just defer to whatever you say. And Doc would be like, all right, well, here, you stand on this street corner. I'm coming back in 1 minute to pick you up on the DeLorean, and then we're going to avoid more trouble once we stop Biff. And then everything that happened being in the 50s, if you decided to never talk with Betty and run out of that house and try and find Doc, be like, Doc, my number one goal is I just want to get home. Just get me home. Just shake him, grab him by the shoulders and shake me. Get me home, get me home, get me home. He would have gotten you home a lot sooner. It would have been,
right.
That would have been priority number one. Wouldn't have even had to have gone into the future, or any of that stuff. Doc would have been like, all right, well, let me take into account the changes that have happened. You would have figured it out. If at any point, like during the Ice Age, you were like, you know what, this has been real. I'm out. Like I can't. This is too much. I can't deal with it. Find me a period in time where I can live and just leave me there. I think we would have played that out, but. I would have tried to give it unending. That's not just, all right, see you next time, goodbye. But it depends on what Kate's mood was and where it carried it. But then as I saw over the course of several sit-down sessions, I could start to see the arc forming. I'm like, oh, well, if she's on this trajectory, then the landing point is probably here. And then we, like I said, we stuck that landing because it was like laying out the giant target from someone jumping from, the cartoon where they're jumping from a burning building. And we caught it.
Mm-hmm.
We measured the trajectory, and I think we caught it.
What do you think was the most surprising moment in terms of where this game took you or us?
I was really surprised. I don't know if it's the most, but the first one that comes to mind is taking 2 months to befriend Marty Jr. The idea that was when I really realized that Kate is in the driver's seat for sure. I kept on nudging her, trying to get in the driver's seat, and that was when she's like, all right, give me the wheel. I have an idea. And we're going to solve this problem not by throwing fists and riding hoverboards, but by changing the course of the future on a fundamental level that will have lasting consequences. And is not just pulling not pulling Marty Jr.'s ass out of the fire one time, but making him a better person. And I'm like, whoa, okay. So then shifting gears to becoming his buddy and then playing video games with him and getting him out of his shell and discovering who he is and how he was bullied and getting so sympathetic with him, and that was unexpected but great, and knowing and then not knowing every other problem that comes forward is Kate gonna decide to try and I know she can't just decide to win over Griff, become his buddy and win him over, but maybe she might try. I don't know. I didn't know how. That was when I started to really see the difference between how Kate solves problems and how Marty solves problems, and exploring that was new every time. It was just where are we going? I don't know where we're going. You're in the lead, and so it was a constant surprise. I had hoped that you would go hang out with Martha in the Old West, but I didn't know for sure that you would. All the choices that she started to make going throughout, I didn't know how she was going to react to Jennifer. I wasn't sure, old Jennifer, was she going to help her? Was she going to not? I was very much prepared for her saying, you know what, Jennifer, you're right, but I'm going to do you one better. Come with me. Let's go into the past. Let's do this and blah, blah, blah. And we'll drop, we'll write that letter together, all that stuff. I was always being a little surprised, but probably the biggest surprise was taking that time to befriend Marty Jr. and Marlene and become friends with the McFly family, and then only to have it taken away from you, not as punishment, but just because that's the consequence of of changing the timeline.
Well, yeah, that's one thing that still hasn't been explored of Kate in the new 2016. She knows that the McFlys are out there,
mm-hmm.
and she has no relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And would she? Will she? There's no reason she shouldn't, aside from tracking them down to befriend them. She'll look into it, I'm sure, because she cares about them, but it's odd. Because now, once again, she doesn't know them. And it's weird to make friends with somebody who you know but don't know like that.
They might be different people.
Yeah. They probably are. Marty has like a whole different life.
If you grew up in a world where hover technology was normal versus, where it's not, how similar are you really going to be?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's I hadn't thought too much about that. I have thoughts, but unless we ever did another, I don't foresee that being a situation. But this ended so beautifully. I don't.
I know. I'm really sensitive to the thought of doing another, because on the one hand I'm like, yeah, victory lap, and then on the other hand I'm like, but it ended so good.
Yeah. Why risk? On a meta commentary, it's like why mess with something if it's great? Much like the Back to the Future films,
right?
Why do a fourth movie or reboot it? That's why I like the comics.
Think, reboot it because, as we've proven with Kate Was Here, having a narrative that involves someone who's not a straight white male
in different time periods
in that timeline is a radically different story, and one that probably should be told. Well, actually, not probably. Screw probably.
Well, we did
should be told. We did for a queer girl, but like. I mean, I don't know. If you inject a person of color into the situation, it's probably not fun anymore. It's probably terrifying and like, I don't know. It's an extremely good thought experiment, and for me, it was a very powerful thing to live, which it really has assured me as to like where I am now and where I'm going, not just as a trans person, but like I do a lot of work interfacing with history at this point. Like Call of Cthulhu Mystery Program has me delving into a lot of scholarly pursuits just by virtue of me being, much like yourself, galaxy-brained weirdo that like needs to see all the angles.
Right.
And I'm learning so much about how to express different aspects of the human condition, and through narratives, but also through time, through actual history, and to feed off of that, and to learn from these trials, to put a spotlight on things that are relatively unknown, and all the different facets of like the time travel that can come with historical fiction writing. And Back to the Future has extreme pop sensibilities. It is highly fictitious, but it is also still historical fiction writing in some regards. But Kate Was Here is even more so, because it had to look at real, not just set dressing, not just aesthetics, not just the weirdness of communicating to different people from different times. It had to actually address real issues, real social issues, far beyond what Back to the Future had to deal with. And that feels extremely, it's been an extremely powerful experience, because living in those spaces, and really, I've had the thought so many times of acknowledging the past, acknowledging history in different ways. Acknowledgement is not the same as living it. Like that, there's a huge difference now. And, logically I could have known that, but I know that very differently now.
Yeah, on a deeper level.
Yeah. And this is something that, I've learned a lot of experiences by transitioning, by being perceived as female, by seeing how the world treats me now, that like dealing with like institutionalized sexism and misogyny, not to mention transphobia. But this is different or complementary or something. This is a separate, more intimate experience. And for that reason, yeah, I actually like, now I'm like, yes, thanks to Kate Was Here, I'm like, reboot Back to the Future, do something complete, but you can't tell the same story with the same characters ever again.
Yeah.
It needs to be like a new story for a new time. Is it, I don't know if continuity even matters, but the most important part is that there's a very valuable discussion to be had. And maybe it does, if it was a movie, it wouldn't matter. Maybe it has to be, in fact, like my experience was lived. And if it's not lived, maybe it doesn't matter at all. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Make one hell of a comic.
Yeah. But this experience has informed so much of the rest of my life going forward in a lot of ways that I will struggle to articulate. But I'm so grateful to have gone through this with you, and to create this with you, and to succumb to the narrative engine of you in a way that I've never experienced before.
Yeah, when's the last time you played a game I GM'd?
Really, I think actually now that just as I was saying that, I was like, wait, has it ever happened? I don't think it's ever happened, Doug.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of even like in passing off of the Omniverse stuff. I don't think, maybe not. Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, I guess it hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's only downhill from here. It's end on a high note. Just make sure this doesn't happen again.
It's been incredible, Doug. It's been unforgettable, life-changing, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I think it's only life-changing and incredible because of the stuff you brought to it. Like you can't, as a player, we bring ourselves into it, and even if you don't closely associate with the character, you're bringing a part of yourself to it. So when you're bringing a part of yourself to it, and especially if it's a personal, like intimate part of yourself, and then I'm adjusting the story to fit what you bring, it can't help but be involved. Like the story can't help but be around that. So thanks for having the courage to explore that, I guess really is what it is. Because otherwise it would have just, if you just say, we're not going to talk about that, we're just going to focus on getting the hell out of here. Totally different story. So if anything, I think the takeaway from a player standpoint, it's go in, just go for it. Like, don't be afraid to role play and just feel the feelings and have fun. And for me, from a GM standpoint, is trust your instincts, I guess, on trusting that at least that I know how much I can go by the skin of my teeth and what my skills are to keep a story going.
Yeah. And also for both player and GM alike, live those moments.
Yeah.
Like to not have the urgency or immediacy or like expectations of like cinematic experiences or whatever. This is a unique experience. This is an experience wholly unlike any other medium. So you take that time to live it always, to perform realistically, to take leaps, to grow, which is sometimes hard to learn. Like, here's where my character needs to will grow.
Strive to work in concert with each other. Do it. Concert. All right.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, just as long as it's never DM versus the player, as long as you're always following like improv rules of not just saying yes anding. I mean, everyone knows this, but like genuinely know that it takes both of you. It takes two to tango. It takes player and GM to make the story together. And if you can give and take the entire time, you can make something awesome.
Yeah. And folks, thank you so much for listening to this. Again, I'm going to keep thanking you for it because it's really special that you're here. We're really grateful for your support. And it means a lot that I have the capacity to share this with anybody because I don't know how to talk about it. and yeah, you're amazing. And let's, if you haven't yet, let's talk about it on the Kate Was Here channel on Discord.
And we'll see you in the future.
Else time.